Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for being here. This being our first session of 5, at least that's the idea. Want to take care of a couple of mostly housekeeping things first. So this course is being offered through the Office of Faith Formation and Lay Ecclesial Ministry through the Diocese for Continuing Education Credit. So that would be our catechists, any teachers in the house, or anything like that. What I am going to pass around are the sheets to let me know who you are and that you're here. If you are not taking this for credit, you do not need to fill this out. Okay. So it is being passed around, I think, but you should have a syllabus. And of course, syllabus day is always my favorite day because usually you get a brief lecture and then you get to go home and, well, sorry, that's not me. I don't know that I've ever been brief in my entire life. But what you have in front of you is the 5-week course, basically where we're headed. So this week, we're going to start with just basically an introduction to who Tolkien was. And we'll move from there towards some of the other thematic experience or like what we're going to talk about. So session 1 is, I have titled it, "The Shadow is Only a Small and Passing Thing." And this first session is to establish that Tolkien's legendarium, which is a big long word for basically every book that has anything to do with Middle-earth, The Lord of the Rings, all of those, is governed by a coherent Catholic metaphysics or philosophy. It's formed by his lived faith, and it teaches you how to recognize those things, those Catholic elements in the narrative itself. So there are 1, 2, 3. So there's 5 goals I want to accomplish today. First is to establish the Catholic lens before we even get to Middle-earth. Again, we're starting with Tolkien himself, the man, Tolkien, and his faith. So before we even dive into the books themselves, we really just want to focus on who he is. That's basically the first half. That's this life and faith of Tolkien. But the second half of today, I've titled "A Grammar of Tolkien," and grammar not in the sense of like syntax and all the fun stuff you remember from phonics, but grammar as in these are key concepts for his understanding of faith, of religion, and these are what was worked into and permeates his writing. So these are going to be the key important points that will then be broken out for the next 4 sessions. We'll be basically breaking them out even further. All right. Any questions before we dive in? All right, then I'd like to introduce to you one of my dear friends, and I'm John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, who was born in 1892 in Bloemfontein, South Africa. So British, was in Britain, born in South Africa. His father worked for a banking company at the time that South Africa was a colony of Great Britain. So that relocated him and his family eventually to South Africa. Not long after Tolkien was born, his dad passed away. It's going to become a recurring theme. Just hang on. Tolkien's dad died when he was 3 years old. So they returned to England from where they're from. Tolkien's father's name is Arthur. So Arthur Tolkien died when he was 3. His mother's name was Mabel. She plays an incredibly important role in his life. So Mabel takes her 2 boys, Hilary and John Ronald, back to England from where they're from. But what they started as a life of middle to upper middle class kind of thing, eventually collapsed into abject poverty. And this has everything to do with his mother. So Tolkien was born in 1892. In 1900, Mabel did the unthinkable thing and converted to Catholicism. Prior to this, Tolkien's father was an Anglican, established Church of England. Still at that time, we're looking at the end of the Victorian era. The church, although it was very much like a polite Christianity, it still carried an influence and an authority in the life of Britain. And not only that, but to understand that the context here is that when Henry VIII, Edward VI, and then Elizabeth separated the Church of England from the wider Catholic Church, there developed an intense anti-Catholic mindset that carried through even a little bit to this day. It is still to this day that you are, I believe it's still to this day, might have changed recently, but if you convert as a member of the royal family to Catholicism, you are disinherited. So that is very much in the air where they're in this time period. And the only thing that began to soften it was about 50 years earlier, which was the conversion of John Henry Newman, who really began that kind of swing and and granted, he too was an outcast, but Newman plays an important role as well, kind of secondarily, but Newman plays an important role for a number of reasons, but also this idea of Newman bringing an intellectual, academic understanding of conversion into Catholicism. So in 1900, Mabel, his mother, converted after taking courses, actually with, I believe, her sister. And here's where this is where this comes into play. You can, particularly women, but women could lose their children after conversion because of the anti-Catholic bias. There was a threat that her boys could be removed from her care and put into the care of a Protestant uncle because of this bias. So not only is she fighting this, she's trying to raise 2 boys. And they find themselves at a parish that is run by the Oratorians, which the Oratorians, the congregation of the Oratory, was founded by John Henry Newman and was dedicated to St. Philip Neri. But Mabel had a problem. She had diabetes, which was a death sentence back then. So she eventually came to die 4 years later. So Tolkien is now 12 years old, and has lost both his mother and his father. And his extended family has nothing to do with him because he also took the courses and was raised Catholic. He became Catholic at the age of 8. Mabel Tolkien's faith was paramount to his understanding. In fact, his entire early life became formed by suffering, tragedy, death. So he understood mostly that the world was in a situation now, after the fall, was a land, we are an earth that, people that are understood or defined by suffering. While Genesis is separated by we do not know how many sad exile generations from the fall, but certainly there was an Eden on this very unhappy earth. We long for it, and we are constantly glimpsing it. Our whole nature, at its best and least corrupted, its gentlest and most humane, is still soaked with the sense of exile. As far as we can go back, the nobler part of the human mind is filled with thoughts of sib, peace and goodwill, and with the thought of loss. We shall never recover it, for that is not the way of repentance. Of his mother, he wrote this: "My own dear mother was a martyr indeed, and it is not to everybody that God grants so easy a way to his great gifts as he did to Hilary and myself, giving us a mother who killed herself with labor and trouble to ensure us keeping the faith." This is the wrong one. Anyway, there's another, I don't know where it's at. Anyway, he also wrote, I should chiefly be grateful for having been brought up since I was 8 in a faith that has nourished me and taught me all the little that I know, and that I owe to my mother, who clung to her conversion and died young, largely through the hardships of poverty resulting from it. When Mabel died, and with a family that would not and refused to honor her wishes to raise the boys in the faith, she then turned them over to a priest of the oratory from the parish, Father Francis Morgan, who from the age of 12 raised him, essentially. He lived with an aunt, but who went through the classes, did convert to Catholicism, but her husband was having none of that. So she abandoned the Catholic Church and returned to her practice of Anglicanism. Tolkien and his brother bounced from family member to family member a couple of times, all the while under the influence of Father Morgan, who was strict. He was of Spanish, Welsh descent, and belonged to the oratory in Birmingham. So this is the same oratory that was founded by John Henry Newman. What he also learned in this experience was the role of authority, the role of the priest, and the all-encompassing way of life that can be Catholicism. He also, at this time, met a young girl named Edith Bratt, who was sorry, I'm a quote behind. This is about authority and obedience. learning obedience. This is where this comes in, because he met Edith Bratt as a fellow foster. She was about his age. Fell madly in love with her. She was Protestant. Father Francis said, absolutely not. You will marry a Catholic. He, and in fact, was banned from speaking to her, from communicating with her. He broke that promise exactly once. And he confessed to it. But from that moment, he promised that he would not speak to her again until he was 18. And he kept it. Understanding that he was being obedient to to his priest, who was raising him, who became a father figure for him. But just as John Ronald was turning of age, coming to his adulthood, a fun little thing broke out in Europe called World War I, where he was drafted and was sent to the front line. He was part of the Battle of the Somme, which is part of the trench warfare French line thing, where they fought and killed. They sent thousands of men to move the trench line 6 feet.
If he had died, would Lord of the Rings have been written?
No.
So we wouldn't be here.
No. Yeah, then we wouldn't be here, and you could have a night off.
Well, I'm sure you want to find another topic.
He had a group of friends from his middle childhood years, middle school. It's British education, so it's marked differently. But as he was coming of age, he had a group of friends that they basically were like a debating society kind of thing. They would read literature, your things that you're big, giant nerds. Yeah. They were all drafted during World War I. He lost all but one. World War I was devastating for Europe. Which is also where he came encounter for really the first time a truly mechanized, or the result of the Industrial Revolution. Now, growing up in Birmingham, he saw the factories and the smog and all that other fun stuff, the pollution and everything else, that everything was covered in dirt and nasty. But to see the result of the Industrial Revolution being employed for war. I mean, this is the war that started with cavalry on horses and ended with mustard gas. So his experience, he actually was eventually transferred out, which is how he, didn't die in the trenches. And writing in another place, he, to his son Christopher, who was drafted during World War II, wrote in one of his letters at the end this. Well, the first war of machines seems to be drawing to its final inconclusive chapter, leaving, alas, everyone poorer, many bereaved or maimed, and millions dead. And only one thing triumphant: the machines. The capitalization is his, not mine. As the servants of the machines are becoming a privileged class, the machines are going to be enormously more powerful. What's their next move? All my love, your father. So now we're seeing, again, World War II, seeing all of the destruction that was wrought upon Europe and the rest of the world because of that. He developed a very deep suspicion of things mechanical. And in fact, throughout his life, he spent most of his time, like he would like to spend most of his time back in like woods and trees. And that's like, there's a number of quotes that of him speaking about like just being in the natural. Which if you've seen the movies, and again, I'm probably jumping ahead of myself here, but the fact that the Ents and the trees take Saruman machines. Okay. But what he comes to understand as part of this process as he's continuing to grow older is he, again, did not appreciate the progress of, as it's been presented, even to this day, we are continuing to see progress being revealed as liberation, freedom. I mean, we're now well past the Industrial Revolution. And we're now in the midst of the boom, the beginning of the boom of the AI generation, which is just the next thing. So we are still in the midst of the idea of progress as salvation, progress as liberation. Tolkien eventually came back from the war. He was became a professor. He was not trained as a literary. His training was not in literature. He's actually a philologist, which is a study of words and where they come from. He actually produced his own translation of Beowulf from the original Old English. He was eventually named the chair of Anglo-Saxon studies at Oxford. That's also the place where when he was first hired in, he got to know, he got taken to a party that was being hosted by a rather gregarious atheist named Jack, who came and invited him in. They began talking, and he joined this group, and this is the core of the group. They called themselves the Inklings, which is to play on words, inkling as in they were writers, but also inkling because they only had an inkling of what they were doing. Of course, Jack is C.S. Lewis. It was because of Tolkien and another friend who took Lewis on a rather long, winding walk that convinced him that Christianity was true. So Lewis and Tolkien remained very good friends through the rest of their lives. Now, there was a bit of a little thing towards the end. It's not that they argued, it's that they sort of drifted apart. And in fact, when Lewis ended up dying before Tolkien, Tolkien grieved the loss of a lifelong friend. But this is probably, make sure I'm on the right one. Yeah. This is actually a letter to his son Michael, the next slide, but speaks to the core of who he was as a Catholic. Tolkien was a daily communicant. He went to Mass. He learned under Father Francis when he was a child how to serve Mass. He continued to go to Mass. There was a point in time, as any young person wants to do, which is to drift away, but not completely. And when he came back with a vengeance. In a letter written to his son is one of his most famous quotes in the letters. Out of the darkness of my life, so much frustrated, I put before you the one great thing to love on earth, the Blessed Sacrament. There you will find romance, glory, honor, fidelity, and the true way of all your loves on earth, and more than that, death. By the divine paradox, that which ends life and demands the surrender of all, and yet by the taste or foretaste, of which alone can what you seek in your earthly relationships, love, faithfulness, joy, be maintained, or take on that complexion of reality of eternal endurance, which every man's heart desires.
Father, so he ended up marrying Edith?
He did.
Okay.
She converted to Catholicism.
Okay.
They were married for a very happy long time. I don't have the date exactly, but they married. She ended up passing before him. And for anyone that knows, so the story of Baron and Luthien. Baron and Luthien's like his great love story. On their gravestones, it says it refers to Edith is marked Luthien, and he's marked Baron. So they had 6 or 7 kids, I think. One became a priest. Yeah. Christopher was the youngest, not you. Christopher was the youngest son. He became I believe he's the youngest, became the literary heir. So a lot of the works that had come out after his death were put together, edited, and processed by him, taking together the plethora of notes that his father left behind. The Silmarillion, which is so if you have the Lord of the Rings, then you have the Hobbit, which predates in the Lord of the Rings. The Silmarillion is basically the first 2.5 ages of Middle-earth. It's basically the creation myth and what happens during all of that. That was actually put together. It was published after his death. Christopher, his son, was the one that put it together, edited it all together, and then had it published. The Silmarillion was the one book he always wanted to publish, Tolkien that is, but never actually got to it because he was a perfectionist. So he kept tweaking.
It should be stated the Lord of the Rings is a third age.
Yes, sorry. So first age, second age, and I believe, the Lord of the Rings begins in the third age of Middle-earth, and it ends with the beginning of the fourth age. We'll get there. Tolkien died on September 2nd, 1973. And I wasn't going to do this, but I have to do this because you can call it fun coincidence, you can call it providence, whatever you want. Who knows the rhyme of the rings? The very beginning of the Lord of the Rings, there's the rhyme of the rings. It begins the entire Lord of the Rings.
One ring to rule them all. 9 rings for mortal man doomed to die. 7 for the dwarf lords in the halls of stone. And 3 for the elf lords, fairest.
3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to bind them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
So I'm assuming 1973 is when he died?
Yes. September 2nd, 1973. Take it for what it's worth. Okay, well. Yes, you should always treat your classmates and teachers with respect and kindness.
Hang it so you don't forget. Oh, pre-K, okay.
Questions? That's basically his life in a nutshell. All right. So then we move on to our second section. What is grammar? So the idea is to, again, articulate the unspoken rules Tolkien assumes about reality, history, evil, grace, and hope. Rules that govern every narrative decision he makes without it ever becoming allegory. And I'll get to that in a minute. And again, the grammar is not what the story says. It's what must already be true for the story to make sense at all.
I had a question. What made in his life, was there something that happened in his life that made him want to spark the Lord of the Rings? Story?
There was a friendly competition, well, mostly friendly competition between him and Lewis about as they started writing and publishing. They were challenged basically because he wanted to basically write an epic, but mostly than anything else, The Lord of the Rings was not written and then the language is created. The story of The Lord of the Rings was written to become the world where the languages make sense. So he had already started constructing his Elvish and other languages back when he was, in his youngest days. And to the point now where with the help of other people who have followed after him, you can actually speak both dialects of Elvish. It has its own writing system called Tengwar. So there's a whole, it's all, and of course, again, that's why him being a philologist is so important, because again, it's about the language and words that then becomes the construct, or the Middle Earth becomes the construct in which the languages make sense. In the movies, they're actually speaking real Quenya, or Sindarin. They're speaking the real Elvish language. Snippets of it, anyway.
I know I see, when I've read the books, of course, his experience from World War I is so vivid in those battlefields.
Mm-hmm.
Massive death.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the tragedy that he experienced in his life. He carried with him. And I think it's important, you're right, it's important to recognize just how much that can be seen, not just his distaste for anything like mechanical, but even war itself.
I know there's a lot talked about he hated allegory, so a lot of things that he didn't like comparatively to real life. But speaking of World War I, the Scouring of the Shire in the last book, whatever, PTSD and coming home from the war and all of that seemed to be carried with him his whole life too, right? I don't.
Yeah.
But so.
It's so because most people will point to one quote that he had out of context that says that he hates allegory, which I have here. But the thing is that it's mostly it's all in context. So he did not like or disliked the idea of straight allegory, although you need certain allegorical devices in order for something to be understood. So what we can't do in the stories is make a one-to-one comparison. So like, one of the things I always turn to is C.S. Lewis is writing allegory. Aslan is Jesus Christ. You cannot get past that. It smacks you in the face. Like, you cannot get past that. However, there is not a one-to-one character in the Lord of the Rings universe that maps to a figure like Jesus Christ. In fact, you can look at up to 4 or even 5 different characters that have elements of who Christ is, but there is not a Christ figure. So, yeah.
I wonder, I've read a lot of different things on, in England, and they did not like Catholics.
Yeah.
Period. In the 1500s, if you were a Catholic, you kind of kept it to yourself because they would quarter you. They would put your horses and they would quarter you.
Yeah.
And the same with the 12 Days of Christmas. That was actually written so you're Catholic, you understood what they were talking about, but you kept it secret
Yeah.
because of the hatred that went on. And I thought, living back in that time, that had to be, I mean, you're strong with your faith, you know, and to know that you got to watch what you say to anybody and
Right.
everybody. Because, yeah, they could kill you because you're Catholic.
I mean, priests were trained, English priests were trained, that's I believe it's the origin of the Venerable English College in Rome. So I think it's the first national college that was established to train priests in Rome itself. They understood that they were being trained to go back to England to die. And every time they received word that one of their brothers who was ordained died, they sang the Te Deum.
That had to be a horrific time. Very much a horrific time.
Catholic emancipation in Ireland wasn't until 1850. And it wasn't, so it was, and that at that time it was still governed by the British Crown. So it was, and at the time Ireland was all Catholic except for Ulster. So, yeah. It got a little better by the late early 1900s, but at least they weren't outright killing you.
Right,
It was just a social death.
right.
So,
Yeah, because it didn't matter what your age was.
no,
It didn't matter
not at all.
at all. If you're a Catholic, you're dead. Yeah. But it's nice to know as time went by that Jesus said, "These are my people."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And everything changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
So you said after the war, he was the trainer.
Eventually, yes.
So he just made, did he like make his living then as like a professor?
Yes. Yeah. He made.
Were the books like something, like they were just like a fun, like little hobby with him and his buddies, or?
Well, the language was actually like it was his project, but the books he had no clue that the books were going to take off like they did. So, granted, not most people don't, but and he actually, I mean, he's considered in a lot of ways a father of the fantasy genre, which he did not set out to do. Because I believe it was also around this time that Lewis wrote Paralandra, his trilogy on like space, like finding a prelapsarian or an alien species that didn't before the fall. I haven't read it, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's about. So yeah, it was more of he wasn't the starving artist.
Yeah.
He was gainfully employed at the university, teaching his courses. So. Okay. So there are, one, two, there are essentially six concepts that are key to understanding what goes on inside the Lord of the Rings. And the first one is, so it's creation and what he calls sub-creation. Creation, everything is created. And in fact, he will always, because he's a good Christian, believes that God alone creates. But creatures in their own way participate in creation. So he obviously rejects any sort of approach to the universe that will deny intentionality, goodness, or order. He will also point to the fact that in our participation in creation, we do not rival God. God is the one and only creator. One of the most famous essays that describes a lot of this is called On Fairy Stories. We make still by the law in which we are made. Fantasy remains a human right. We make it in our measure and in our derivative mode because we are made. And not only made, but made in the image and likeness of a maker. So because we are imprinted with the image of God as creator, there is part of us that is naturally creative. And again, because God alone creates ex nihilo out of nothing, our participation in creation is by using his stuff. Painting, or art, even literature, whatever it may be, sculpting, it takes something already there to make something else. So in that way, we are participating in God's creative action. And more than just that, it's reflective of the idea of the transcendentals, again, who God is. So God is the true, the good, and the beautiful. So beauty is not just ascribed to God, he is beauty itself. And true beauty is revelatory. So beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. If you like something that's ugly, you just have bad taste. Beauty is not subjective. Beauty is objective because God himself is. And God is beauty. Aquinas will say that something is more or less beautiful based on how close it is to the reality it seeks to be. So, a beautiful statue will look like what it's supposed to look like. There's a reason that people can go and stand at the back of St. Peter's Basilica and weep at the sight of the Pietà. We don't necessarily do that with the artist that took a piece of like banana and stuck it to a canvas. There's a reason, even in Catholic art and architecture, there's a reason that there are certain churches that are, when Notre Dame burned, the world mourned because the church, first of all, began construction in like the 1100s, and it's still standing. But because we instinctively understand that there's something about that is a loss when it burns. Beauty. Beauty reveals truth. That's the entire like theological like school and understanding of 20th century theologian Hans von Balthasar, who is the one that influenced Joseph Ratzinger. Von Balthasar's entire like program was, we have evangelization wrong. We always start with either the good or the true, when in fact you need to start with the beautiful first. Beautiful attracts. Why? True and good. Okay. But here's the thing about creation and subcreation, is that these are not meant to just, again, not meant to be just whatever you want. And even back then, we had the beginning, like the seeds of our modern expression of, well, creation, self-creation. Because again, we have turned everything back in on ourselves, such that we are whoever we want to be, however we feel we are. And that is all encompassing. We define ourselves in a way that essentially creates our identity. And applied on a grand scheme, you then have self-creative myth, which is the second thing. We all need to unlearn what that word means first. Because the way we use it today is absolutely wrong. We use myth and we think, what? Fake news, right. We hear myth and we think false. Oh, that's made up, it's fake. That's not how Catholics use it. It's certainly not how he did. Because while it may not be literally true, the content is truth. There's myth in the Bible. It is a story that conveys truth that may or may not have happened exactly the way it was written down that way. For Tolkien, myth communicates truth through the imagination, but not deceptively. So it's not about fooling you, tricking you into thinking one thing. It's about communicating a reality to you through a different pathway, if you will. This is where allegory comes into play versus what Tolkien will call applicability. Am I going the wrong way?
I don't think it's changing.
That's the one I want.
That's it then.
Yes. I cordially dislike allegory in all its manifestations, and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of readers. I think that many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader and the other in the proposed domination of the author. Does that make sense? So, the freedom of the reader is applicability versus the domination of the author is allegory. Like I said, you cannot get past Aslan as Christ. That is imposed by the reader or by the author upon your reading. What?
We're good now. I had no idea what he was talking about, but now we're good.
Okay.
I was thinking of like a specific example of allegory. So the Crucible is written as an allegory for McCarthyism and everything. So the play is written as the witch hunt is for the the Red Scare,
Yeah.
the communists. But in this case, Tolkien leaves it up to the interpreter, the reader, to interpret that as they will.
Because a lot of people tried to impose the allegory on him that the ring was the atom bomb, that like the good versus evil was the West versus the Soviet Union. Like all of these like political allegory was they were trying to impose it upon him, and Tolkien's like, no, no, it's not at all what I'm trying to do. So, exactly. So again, this is where we get this misattribution of what Tolkien is trying to do. So again, it's not that, I mean, he does not like allegory, but it's because he has a much deeper understanding of what's going on. We good with that one? Okay. So evil, power, domination. We get a much bigger understanding if we also bring in the Silmarillion into this. What we have to be aware of is, so sin is disordered love. The Greek word is hamartia, which means to miss the mark. Second is that evil depends on the good, because evil itself does not exist. Evil is the privation of the good. So it's the lack of good, as opposed to having something itself. It works the same way, like darkness doesn't exist. It's the absence of light. We just have a name for it. So evil doesn't exist. Domination, which again is a theme that runs through The Lord of the Rings, is power, authority, severed from love. Disordered desire, disordered love, coupled with authority, leads to tyranny, essentially. This one was on myth. I missed this one. Legends and myths are largely made of truth and indeed present aspects of it that can only be received in this mode. And long ago, certain truths and modes of this kind were discovered and must always reappear. This one's from The Fellowship of the Ring. The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. But more so is the next one from The Return of the King, book 3. This is Frodo talking to Sam in Cirith Ungol, for anyone that's read the book or watched the movie. No, they eat and drink, Sam. The shadow that bred them can only mock. It cannot make. Not real new things of its own. I don't think it gave life to the orcs. It only ruined them and twisted them. And if they are to live at all, they have to live like other living creatures. Foul waters and foul meats they'll take, if they can get no better but not poison. They've fed me, and so I'm better off than you. There must be food and water somewhere in this place. Which, again, I'll expand upon it more when we get to that actual experience, next week, actually, when we talk about creation and subcreation. Is there is no, when evil corrupts the Satan figure, if you will, that is Morgoth, that precedes Sauron. Sauron was corrupted. There's a lot that I'll have to explain when we get there. But anyway, evil doesn't exist. It's a corrupting and a twisting of the things that are already there. So the orcs themselves, the first orcs, were not created by Sauron or Melkor or Morgoth. The first orcs were not created. They were elves that were corrupted. Yes. Yes. The next one is mercy and providence. Mercy opens history, providence governs without coercion. God works through free will, and small acts matter. Providence is essentially God's plan and his action in the world. And there are certain things that happen that we cannot know why. That in the end produce something greater than we ever could have imagined. I remember seeing that quote here, but I don't have it. Okay. Tolkien wrote the same thing. I'm not that smart, so I can't make that up. But the idea here, again, providence is the will of God, the work of God, using and respecting our free will to effect his outcome. And in the end, again, may not know what it is, but we trust that he is in charge. There's a couple of places where Gandalf mentions that Frodo was meant to have the ring, that Bilbo was meant to find the ring. Well, why? Because of what happens in the end. So that's the work of providence in the grand scheme of history. And mercy, that one is fairly straightforward. And mercy plays a big role. And what we see particularly is how the pity of Frodo saves the mission at the end. Stay tuned for more of that. The next one is the long defeat. Actually, I am a Christian, and indeed a Roman Catholic, so that I do not expect history to be anything but a long defeat, though it contains some samples or glimpses of final victory. Faithfulness matters even when victory is unseen or unassured. And history itself is marked by loss. If we follow our understanding of our history, it is marked by loss after loss with flashes of the goodness that is to come. So here, it's understanding that the most important thing is fidelity, faithfulness, as opposed to bravery, courage, whatever it may be. It is the charge of the Rohirrim at the Battle of the Pelennor Field. It is Aragorn charging the Black Gate. This is what this is. There's no guarantee, but there's also no mushy utopian saccharine understanding of hope. It's a hope that's won through obedience and trust. So success, therefore, doesn't become how many battles you win. Success is marked by how faithful you are. And in the end, faithfulness is rewarded. The last one, I might actually get you out of here early. The last one is eucatastrophe, which is big Greek word. which means, like, in the Greek, it means good turning towards. Kata and strepho mean I turn against. So to get catastrophe means to be turned against. You add you, again, as in Eucharist, you end up with good. This is probably one of the most defining things of Tolkien's theology, of who he is. And this is the sudden turn or the sudden breakthrough of joy when all seems lost. Everyone loves a happy ending. We experiment, I think, with stories that don't do that. Almost every movie that Quentin Tarantino or the Coen brothers have made have, like, just leave you either confused or angry. Because we're built for this. We love the underdog story. We love the story that is about good overcoming evil, about right and truth and all of the things that we know are good in the world. Which is why fairy tales, or fairy stories in his language, are so important. And not just him. I'm going to butcher this quote. But G.K. Chesterton once said that, fairy tales aren't told to children to let them know that dragons exist. They already know they exist. Fairy tales are told so that they know that dragons can be defeated. And in Tolkien's mind, the greatest eucatastrophe in the history of the world was the resurrection. When all seemed lost, hope abandoned, the tomb was empty. Tolkien assumes that a world that is created and good but wounded by sin. It is governed by providence, sustained by mercy, marked by endurance, and finally opened to joy beyond its own limits. The world that Tolkien believed in, and the world that he imagined, is a world that is created, it is intelligible, wounded by evil, governed by providence, and open to hope beyond its own limits. It's not an optimism, but it is hope is metaphysical confidence. So a philosophical confidence. Darkness does not exist. Neither does it last. Evil is terrifying, but it is temporary. So, questions here? Tolkien's Catholic faith was inherited, it was costly, it was disciplined, and it was sacramental. His imagination was formed in a sacramental or a Catholic worldview, which means that his work is also this. It is sacramental, it is disciplined, it's ordered. God is creator and Lord of history. Evil infiltrates but does not have the last word. And even when evil enters in, and this is where we have to be really careful to maintain a Catholic approach to creation, is that despite the fall, creation is still good. We do not believe in total depravity. That is Calvin or Luther or one of those. We are, because we are created in the image of God, we are created good with a predilection or a concupiscence to sinfulness. The idea here is to set up for you the next few weeks so that we can I can speak relatively intelligently, we'll see how that goes, about themes or anything that you might find in the book, so that when you read the books, which if you haven't, please, I'm not asking you to read the books till next week. Like, that's not going to happen. That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if you ever get a chance, that you should probably read them because they're good. But to understand, or what you'll be able to see, is not, again, a one-to-one, or you won't see, oh, this is Jesus, oh, this is Peter. What you will see is a Catholic worldview that has been shaped by the church, by the faith that we have and hold, that he could not help but, because he was imbued with a Catholic view of life. To do so would have been, in an essence, to write against his nature, to write against his person.
Did his books become popular, like, far removed from his death? Because if he was writing at a time that was so anti-Catholic, and these themes are so prevalent in the book, wouldn't the books have been...
Well, again, because they're prevalent, but it's not one of those things, it's not in your face. So it's there, it shapes the narrative, but it doesn't define the narrative. Because again, most people read a story about 4 hobbits taking a 3-book journey to destroy a piece of jewelry. So it's not so much that, again, you can't, if you understand, and if you are also imbued in the same worldview, you can start to make the connections yourself. But if you're not necessarily looking for it, or if you're not aware of it, you won't see it. But at the same time, it can be influential because of the imagination. The same way that cultural Catholicism works. How many people who have not gone to church since they were confirmed still give something up for Lent? Because they are shaped by that view.
Excuse me, Father.
Yes.
Just speak up here before I blow up.
Sorry.
And it's just deep. It's like, I wish I had known this, or I would have read these. No one ever told Faith blown up, nothing. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So this whole time I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I gotta read these books. And I'm frustrated that no one ever said to me, even my Catholic friends that I know have read, have never said that to me.
I read them because that was what everybody was doing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you gotta read it.
Did you ever pick up on any of that or not
A little
necessarily?
bit, yeah, the good and the evil, but not to the degree that I was
Mhm.
now.
Yeah.
I just had to say how upset I am.
I just saw this video the other day about which like political party had like because there were people were saying about like, oh, Lord of the Rings is more conservative, and then you had like the people on the left saying, oh, Lord of the Rings is liberal. So it's kind of funny to see that each person, like Tolkien and like his what he wanted was that it to resonate within each person their own way. So I just think it's funny that like we obviously we see the Catholic and all these other things, but then other people see it and they think it's something completely different. So I just think that's interesting that it's fundamentally Catholic
Yes.
at its heart and root and everything, but then it also speaks to a true nature that maybe even people don't, like you said, you have an atheist friend who loves Lord of the Rings. There's something deep down in them that they know that is true to it, even if they can't on a surface level
Exactly.
identify that.
Exactly. Yeah, because he himself referred to it as a fundamentally Catholic work.
When I had VHS, is what I have at home, still have them. But when I was watching it, and you get enthroned in watching this, and when they brought in the orgs and all this, and I thought, okay, this wasn't just happening, this was planned. And now we've got a battle going between good and evil. And when I watched it, I thought, well, good's got to win. It has to win. It has to win because it's all about God. It has to win.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that was, those were really, really good.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Because it's, go ahead.
I saw something, it's funny that they were comparing it to, war and politics back then. And I saw something that said that the ring can be compared to like our cell phones. And how there's like, it's like something we're drawn to, we're always checking for, we don't want to be without in our pockets, but it takes from us. And the longer we have it, the more dependent we are, the more it takes from us. And it can take us into another world when we're like, when we have it on us, or we're like when we're attached to it. And now I can't unsee that. And it's like, I see that. Like,
Yeah.
whenever. So it's like it's so applicable. It's like almost like he could have predicted technology on cell phones, the machine in our hand, like the ring in our hand. So it was like I couldn't unsee that then, and it's just amazing how the through line through it.
And that's where we can draw this distinction between what he's talking about, between applicability versus allegory. It's what keeps the story contemporary and relevant, is that you can see our own modern day ring, and that, just the experience of that. So yeah, absolutely, that's perfect.
Again, isn't that the Bible?
Yes.
It's always relevant.
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah. Now, granted,
it goes back to his Catholic.
he's not writing, this is not gospel. This is not scripture. Just below it.
At the same time, we knew watching it, we knew what we were seeing. We knew what we were talking about. And, and I'm on the edge of my seat saying, God's going to win, he's going to win, he's going to win.
Yeah.
But you're right, if you watched it today, wow. You're saying about the race, oh yeah, wow. What you would see now,
Yeah.
that you didn't see then.
Yeah.
My reading letters and biographies of Tolkien, it seems like in his youth when he was living in an apartment building future wife Edith was there. And Father Murphy said, you cannot see this woman until your 21st birthday. And that's when he came into his inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
He willfully disobeyed Father.
Mm-hmm.
And he found out.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had to come before him and admit to it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that had a really big effect on him later, throughout the rest of his life, that willful disobedience to him.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think it related back to his Catholic faith and to his mother also at the same time, because he mentions that later on.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I'd just mention that.
Yeah. No, because it was when he did disobey Father Morgan's dictate, he actually agonized over it and eventually wrote a letter admitting it to him. And that was the moment, from that moment until his 21st birthday, that he did not see her again, did not communicate with her again. So just the guilt experienced, healthy sense of guilt experienced with repentance, confession, and mercy.
Right.
So. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, rebuttals? Rebuttal?
So no. Oh yeah. No. I just thought it was cool. Like everybody was kind of talking about like how you said like the applicability versus the allegory. Like sometimes people thought it was just a great story, or not. Sometimes people thought it had to do with politics or cell phones or something like that. But then I think it's also cool because it kind of goes back to like the creator, and God allows us our free will to find the good in the end.
Mm-hmm.
He allows us to read the story in the way that serves us best, and I think we all kind of come to some of the same conclusions that there's good versus evil, and that there are things that will lead to our downfall, and all of those things. I just think it's cool.
Yeah. Cool. I was looking for the... So next week, creation, subcreation, and myth. Hope to see you back.